Hi, this is Peter McCarroll from Business Express. In this video, I'd like to walk you through our online annual accounts questionnaire process. This process is intended to help us be efficient, ask the right questions, and to speed up the response time from you. What will happen is, usually about 2 weeks before we are available to start on your work, you'll receive an email from us. Email will look like this. It should list in it all the organisations and individuals that are part of your group. We usually send this to the central person within the group, so you might receive a checklist for your spouse as well, if appropriate. What I'd like you to do when you receive this email is, first of all, check to make sure that all the appropriate individuals and companies are listed in the email. If something appears to be missing, please just hit reply and ask us for clarification, and we'll be happy to check. Every now and then we get the email address wrong, or we forget to include one of the business units inside your group. We do try and work on the whole group at one time, so if you see something missing, please feel free to alert us. In order to process the questionnaires, you're going to need to log into the system. You'll have one login that will give you access to all of the individuals and companies within your group. And you'll see down here that there is a link to the website and also a username and an initial password. All you have to do is click on the link, and that'll open up the online questionnaire system. You'll probably want to grab your password as well, and that will log you into the system. Now, feel free at this point to change the password if you'd like to, and put in something that's more memorable for you to be able to use later on. Now, from the home page here, you'll see that you have each of the organisations listed. Okay, in this case, there is a company and an individual, and there are 3 steps to the process. The first is the questionnaire, the second is to reconfirm your terms of engagement, which you sign online, and the third is a checklist. The process takes anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes per organisation, depending on how much detail you need to give us as part of this process. What I'd like to point out here is that if you trade through a company, then your business activities will be reported through the company, not through your individual questionnaire. If you trade as a sole trader, then there probably won't be a company, or if there is a company, that might be, say, for investment property only, and then your business activity will get put through your personal annual accounts checklist. If you're not sure where to report bits of information, please feel free to email us or give us a call. So I'm going to walk through the personal questionnaire here to start with, and to do that I simply click on Fill in Questionnaire. That's now going to open the detailed checklist. Now, what I need to say on this checklist is it does look a little overwhelming at first because there are lots of questions. As you answer questions, more or less questions will appear or disappear depending on how you answer them. The first time you come to this checklist, most of the questions will not have been pre-answered. However, next year when we send you the same questionnaire, it'll remember your answers from last year for the most part, and then it'll help you to move through the questionnaire faster. I do recommend, however, that you read and consider every question so that you don't miss something that might be relevant if things have changed. So here we've logged into my personal return questionnaire, and we're going to read the information, and we're going to click Next. At any point you can add a general note by clicking the Add Notes button here in the top right corner, or you can click on Add Files, and that will allow you to upload a document like a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet. As you're reading through each of the questions, you'll find a little Add Notes button beside each question. So if you are not sure on the answer, feel free to add a little question here. That will allow us to be able to review your responses, and if we think anything might have been done wrong, we can contact you. So as you go through these questionnaires, these questions, you will say yes or no to most of these, and these will open up other sections within the questionnaire. So in this particular case, I'm going to take this as myself being the shareholder of the company. I'm going to read through this and ask, do any of these apply to me? We can say, I'm going to say, for example, yes, I have residential rental property. Now, this is a personal tax questionnaire, so we'd only say this if it was in my personal name. If I held the rental property in a company name, I would answer no, because I'm going to respond to that question in the company. I'll read through anything else. For investments, you don't need to include KiwiSaver accounts or those kind of accounts in here. You just need to worry about interest-bearing accounts like deposit accounts, term deposits, etc. Investments in shares, whether it's New Zealand or overseas. So we might say yes, we have a couple of those. We have no farming no farming operations. So we're going to answer yes or no there. Should be fairly straightforward as to whether or not these apply. Remember that selling products, selling services, if they are done in a company name, you will answer no on your personal questionnaire. Once you've done that, if you've said you have any form of business activity, it might ask you what kind of accounting system you use. If you have Xero and you use Xero, then you're going to click Xero here. If you're not sure, simply say bank statements and cash records or manual cash book. Not computerized. Something along those lines will be appropriate. In this case, we're simply going to say bank statements and cash records. Okay. If the nature of the business has changed during the year, you'd say yes, and then you give me some detailed information. So in this case, I might say that I actually purchased the rental property in May 2013. At any point you can save your answers. There's no need to save as you go. Every time you click the next button, it'll remember that you've saved. It'll save the answers as you go. But if you expect to walk away and come back to it later, always a good idea to save just in case it times out or the screen closes on you while you're out. On the next screen here, it's jumped straight to rental property because I answered no on the other trading activity. It's asking me here if my accounting records include details of rental income and expenses. If I answer no to this, it's going to ask me a lot of detailed questions about the kinds of information that we would need to be able to prepare a rental statement. Now, if you are providing us with a spreadsheet or any other form of computerized or manual documentation, just feel free to say yes. They would be your accounting records, and we wouldn't need you to enter all that information onto this questionnaire. The questionnaire defaults to say, hey, if we're not sure if we've got it, let's ask again. Okay, we would normally want to see some level of detail on those transactions, so it just depends on how much information that we've asked for. In this case, I'm going to assume that I've already got that information available on some sort of spreadsheet, and I'm going to email that, which I could do by clicking on Add Files. In this case, I'm going to just put in some basic information about the property. Remember, this will be remembered for next year. And click on Next Rental. If you have more than one, we've only got one. So we click to the next screen. This is the investment screen. Most of you will be filling this out if you have any form of interest or dividend income. So most people will have a certificate of interest from a bank or somewhere like that. If you have any shares or other dividend kind of activity, we'll need to include this here. Now keep in mind, if the shares are in companies that we do the accounting for, you can safely say no. The reason for this questionnaire is for us to gather information we don't already have. So if we already have information on the shareholdings in your personal companies, then you don't need to remind us about that because we already have that on file. So you'll go through here and say, yes, I have these, no, I don't have these, and you'll say next. Now, the next page here, because we have rental transactions, it's going to ask us whether we had a credit card or barter card used during the period. We might say, yes, I did actually buy some things for the rental property on my credit card. Did we transfer any fixed assets from the owners to other family members during the period? No, we didn't. Do we have any loans or mortgages? Yes, we do. Did we bank any money to an account that's not the one that we're using to prepare our records from? No, everything went into that account. If it did, we would have to then provide further information. Now again, with this question, if you've already given us this information, maybe as part of your GST cycle, then you don't need to say yes here because you've already given it to us and we have already accounted for it. Okay, do we incur any legal expenses? Yes or no. Repairs and maintenance over 500? No. And any natural disaster? No. So now we're on to the Home Office questions. Again, if you're reporting on your personal return and you've got everything else in the business, you would answer no to these questions. But on your business return or your company return, you might answer yes to say that we used our personal home for business purchases or business purposes during the year. I'm going to skip through this because we'll come back to most of these when we do our company return. Okay, so here's the personal tax questionnaire. Did you receive income with POA withholding? And we'll say yes, we did. Did we receive a share of income loss from another entity? Again, this only wants information that we at Business Express have not already received. If we prepare the accounts for that organisation, just click no. If you get those information from somewhere else, then you'll need to say yes and supply us with the details. Okay, I'm not going to go through every question here. You can read through these and decide if any of these are applicable to you, and then you can say yes or no as appropriate. Remembering that if you answer how you answer this year will be remembered for next year, and you won't have to keep repeating this process. You'll just confirm that it's all up to date. Now we go through our general questions to ask whether or not any information has changed or there's other stuff you might like to discuss with us once we've finished your year-end accounts. And then you'll click next. If there are any questions that we had skipped over, and we hadn't answered them, then they will be listed down here, and it will be a good idea to go back and complete that information in order to be able to proceed. And then we'll click Finalize. At any time you can save and you can exit the application or just close it down and log back in later, and you will then be able to return to where you were. Once you have completed the questionnaire, it'll take you straight to the Terms of Engagement screen. Now this is just a summary of the Terms of Engagement, just basically confirming that this is an ongoing engagement. You've already agreed to our Terms of Engagement and consenting to us continuing to prepare your accounts and file your tax returns for you. So you can click Electronically Sign and click OK. For your personal returns, you'll need to have each individual taxpayer make sure they put their name in there rather than the first. If it's for your spouse, make sure the spouse actually does consent. Okay, and then the third screen is the checklist, and I recommend that you actually print this checklist out. We don't start your accounts until this checklist comes back in. So you've answered all the questions, and then this checklist will give you a list of other things that you might need to include for us in order for us to complete the accounts. These usually refer to things like bank statements, either for the year or for year end, depending on how I've answered questions. Questions on insurance and loan documents. We said that we had a loan, so it's asking us for loan or mortgage statements for the year. Details of rental income and expenses. We said that we already had those records, so it's asking us or reminding us to include them. And any investment statements such as interest and RWT certificates need to be attached as well. Remember, you can simply add files at this point. If you do add files and that satisfies everything we've asked for, just send us an email so that we know that you've done it. But I would recommend that you actually print this checklist, go through it, make sure under the client check column that you tick them all off to say, yep, I've got this, got this, got this. If there's any not applicable, just say NA, and then you can return this with the documents to us so that we can then go through and check to make sure that you've given us everything that we've asked for. And that completes the three-step process for your personal return. As I said, for your personal return, if you're not a sole trader, i.e. you're working through a company, your personal tax return questionnaire will probably take maybe 5 minutes. Usually pretty straightforward. Depends on how much information you have to go and get for us. So now I'm going to go through a company return, and we'll go through this in a little bit more detail. Feel free to pause right now, grab a cup of coffee, and come back. Okay, so we're going to go through the business return now, or the company return. Again, remember that there's a difference here between each individual taxpayer. If you run a business through a company, then you answer the questions about that business in the company checklist, not in the personal checklist. So in this case, we're going to assume here that this company sells products, that we don't sell other services, we don't have a rental property or commercial leases, all those other things, and we don't have any significant investments, shares, etc. in this company because it's basically a trading/retail company. We're going to click Next. So the first question when it comes to a business is whether or not you're GST registered. Now again, this data is remembered, so you won't have to fill it out again next year, or just confirm it. But just fill in the information here. Even though we already have this, it would be useful for you to fill it in correctly. 6 monthly payments basis, and which accounting system are we going to use. Now we have this client in Xero, so we're going to say 6 monthly payments and Xero accounting system. Were ACC levies paid during the year? Yes, and all we need is your ACC number. Now in some cases we already have this, doesn't hurt to give it to us again. As I said, next year that data will be remembered. Okay, has anything changed during the year? No, no changes in shareholdings, no changes in directors. Click Next to move on. Obviously you'll click Yes if any of those things apply. Okay, this is the same screen that we saw on the personal return with a few extra questions added in. So was there a credit card used? We're going to say no. Were the final takings for the period banked after year end? Well, actually they were. We're a retail store, and our 31st of March deposits, 31st of March sales weren't banked until about the 2nd of April. So we had to go and look that information up, and would say actually it was $1,245.70 that we received and banked on April the 2nd. Are we registered for PAYE? Yes, we do. We have employees. We have 2 staff members. Do we have any holiday pay or bonus salaries owing at the end of the year? Yes, we do. How much is owing? Now, in this case, you'll need to go to your payroll system and get this information. If you don't have access to that, let us know. If you're still running manual payroll systems, for goodness sake, get off them and get onto something proper like Crystal Payroll, and we'd be happy to help you set that up. What we need to know here is how much you had in outstanding holiday pay or accrued leave. And so in this case, we're just going to put a round number here of 2,000. The second question is a little bit more complicated. We need to know the actual amount of holiday pay that you paid within 63 days of year end. So that would take you up to approximately the 2nd of June, in this case 2014. You'll need to go through and look at your actual payroll records and determine what leave was actually paid out. Not stat leave, just holiday pay, annual leave or termination leave that was outstanding in that period. And the reason we ask for that is that we can only deduct the amount of leave that was actually paid out within 63 days of year end. And I would recommend that you then attach those documents that support both numbers to your checklist, or send them in with us. Okay, next question is on fringe benefits. Were any fringe benefits provided to employees? If you're not sure, please add a comment to tell us what's going on there. Fringe benefits would normally include low interest loans, motor vehicles, or goods and services supplied at less than market value. If you purchased or wrote off any fixed assets during the period, you would say yes here, and you'd provide us with some appropriate details. Again, if we have your information in Xero, we probably already know that, so please just feel free to add any comments that you might want to give us at this point to remind us of things, particularly the big items, but again, we probably already know those. Did you transfer any fixed assets from the family to or from family members during the period? You only have to answer that yes if you took something out of the business and used it personally, or if you took something that was your personal or family asset and started using it for the business. Were there any loans or mortgages or hire purchases during the period? Please include any lease agreements. Let's say you're leasing your photocopier or leasing your FPOS machine or something along those lines. We need to know about that. We need to see a copy of the contract. So again, particularly for new items here, you'd check yes and say here are the new items. Did you incur any entertainment expenses during the period? To be really honest with you, probably just say no on that one. We're going to check that anyway, and there's not enough information on this questionnaire for us to do a good job of following up on that. So if anything special, add some notes, but we're going to look into that in more detail. We particularly do that during GST cycles if you're registered. Did you incur any legal expenses? Again, we probably have that information from your records, but any notes on what happened there, we need to know what they were for as well. Did you incur any repairs and maintenance over $500? And that's just going to help us assess whether or not something was it needs to be capitalized, and if it's all properly identified in your coding in Xero or on the records you give us, just say yes. If it's not properly identified, then we're probably going to need to get more information from you on that. Okay. And have you been affected by natural disaster? This is really going to only affect people in Christchurch. Okay, the next screen deals with any accruals and adjustments we have to make. Most people now are making electronic payments rather than writing checks. So if you are writing checks, you need to go to your checkbook and look at all the checks written maybe in the month of March or your balance date month, and look to see when they were presented. If they were presented after the 31st of March, you need to let us know about that. So you click yes, and you say either I'm going to give you a spreadsheet, or I'm going to fill it in on the forms here. Okay, do you have any accounts owing to you at period end? This is accounts receivable. Now, if you're in Xero and you are already putting all your invoices into Xero, so you have the standard edition or higher, then you can simply say that they're all on the computerized records. Now, if you're using Xero with Cashbook, or we're doing your Xero data entry for you, then we won't have those records. So it's very important that you tell us what items that you invoiced before the end of the year that people still owe you about. And you would need to then give us either a handwritten or a spreadsheet of those items so that we can then accrue them correctly. If any bad debts are written off during the year, it's helpful for us to be able to check on those. And then the last question is, do you have any accounts that you owe at period end? Now, this is accounts payable. Again, if you're in Xero and you're using accounts payable and you're entering your invoices when they come in and then marking them as paid when you pay them, we will probably have most of the information that we need. If you're not doing that, let's say you're on the Cashbook system, or a lot of our clients, even though they have the accounts payable module available, they still really only enter things when they get paid. We need you to go through and find out what items you might have paid after year end that would actually relate to previous to year end. Now, the easiest way to do that is actually to go to Xero, to look at the general ledger detailed general ledger report and filter it based on the 1st of April through till, say, the 31st of May. Print that to Excel, or export that to Excel, and then you go through line by line and you just look at all the items that are on there and highlight anything you think that might relate to the previous tax year. Okay, that's the easiest way to do that. If you don't do that, we will probably send you a copy and ask you to do that for us. That'll just slow things down. So I'd recommend that you do that yourself. So again, that's the detailed account transactions report. Set that for the 2 months after year end. So if you're a March year end, that'll be 1st of April to 31st of May. Export it to Excel. Open it. Just highlight the rows for anything that relates to March or earlier, and then save that, and then either add files, print it, or email it out to us. Now we're asking whether there was a cash float at the end of the year. If you're a retail business, you will have a cash float, and usually that's the amount of money that sits in the till from time to time. And so my normal cash float is $267. Was any petty cash on hand at year end? In my case, no, because we use the cash till for that. But if you might be in office and have a petty cash tin, so you might say, yes, we have petty cash with a float of $50 in it. Okay. Again, if you have petty cash, it's important to make sure that you're giving us the movements through petty cash throughout the year. If we haven't got that at the end of March for your GST return, then please make sure you send us a full petty cash log of all the ins and outs so we can balance up. If you carry stock on hand at year end, then we need some details on that. So some sort of stock report will be necessary. The official method is that we need to value it at the lower of cost or market value. So if you're using anything other than that method, you need to tell us what method it's valued at. We also value stock at the GST exclusive rate. So if you are valuing those at GST inclusive, we might need to adjust for that as well. If there's any items in stock that you believe now have been impaired, which means that they have been either damaged or are just not saleable at higher than their cost price, we might make an adjustment downwards. So if that's the case, if you think that the value of that stock on hand now is less than cost, then feel free to say yes and give us some notes on what that might be. If there were any goods in transit, where maybe you've booked the payable but the goods hadn't arrived, or maybe you sold something but hadn't issued the invoice and that item was no longer in your inventory numbers, we would need to identify that as well. And if you have work in progress, now this could apply to almost anybody. For example, you're a builder and you have started a project, you've incurred some expenses, you've put some time on the job, but you haven't sent an invoice out yet. Then we would need to adjust for some sort of work in progress. If you're a professional, say a consultant or someone that bills by the hour, there might be jobs where you have already incurred some time, you're entitled to claim for that, but you haven't billed it. Again, we would normally do some sort of an accrual for work in progress as well. So if you have work in progress, please say yes and let us know some more details about that. Now we get to the home office questions, and this will apply to you whether you're a sole trader or a company. If you have more than one company, it is normal for us to include the home office expenses in the primary company, although sometimes we do split them out between multiple companies. My recommendation is that you answer this question in your biggest enterprise, and then send us a note as to how you would like us to allocate this out between the enterprises. We would normally have that on file if we've done you before, and therefore we wouldn't need to ask you again, but we do recommend that you fill this out in one place rather than splitting it over multiple companies, just to make our lives easier, and it makes the audit trail a bit simpler for us as well. So if you use your home for business purposes, which most of you do, you'll answer yes. Okay, and then you're going to go and fill out the questions about whether or not you operate the business from home. Maybe you have an office somewhere else, but you also do some work at home or store some supplies at home. So the next question is, were all the personal home expenses incurred during the period paid by the business? So you'd answer yes if the business actually paid your home power, your home rates, your mortgage interest, all that sort of thing. For the most part, we don't recommend that, so we recommend you leave that in your personal accounts, and therefore you would say no to this question, which means we're going to ask you for more details on the next screen. Do your accounting records show these details? Well, in most cases, they're not going to. Okay, so now we're going to open up this form with all the information that we need to ask here. Now, if you don't know these numbers here about the total square foot of your home or the home area used for business, if we've done your accounts before, then we'll have that information already if we've done a home office claim. So you might just need to leave those blank and we will fill them in for you later on. But if you're new to us, then we'll need to know the total area of your house, so maybe it's 150 square meters, and then the total amount of the area that is generally set aside for business use. It doesn't have to be exclusive, but it does have to be sort of a significant use. So your kitchen table probably doesn't count, but a home office or an office area, maybe it's the corner of the lounge, it might even include your garage if that's where you're storing inventory and so on, or the company car, you could certainly include that as well in the total square foot. So let's say that in this case we actually have an office plus a few other spaces around the house, and that accounts to 25 square meters. So that equates to about a 17% portion of the home that is used for business purposes. Now it's going to ask you what kinds of expenses you've paid for the house, and the most common one, if you own the house, it's going to be rates, interest, power, and other utilities. Home and contents insurance would count. Okay, if you don't own the property, it would be rent. Business toll calls from your home line. This does get a little tricky, so if you do have business toll calls that have gone through on the home line, then you'd want to summarize that for us. We're just happy with the total number there. And any repairs and maintenance on the house, we can review as well. Sometimes we can't claim them all, but certainly feel free to give us some information there and maybe give us a schedule on that as well. Telephone line rental for your home. Generally speaking, we will claim 50% of your home telephone line rental for the business if you're operating a home office in a reasonable fashion. However, if you also claim a cell phone as a full business expense, then generally we ignore the home line because you'd generally be using the cell phone. If that's not the case, feel free to discuss that with us. If you have an internet connection at home, you are going to be using that for the business these days, so again we would claim 50% of that as part of your home office. Any other expenses that you've used in the home for the business, feel free to supply us with some other details, maybe some notes or attach a file so that we've got some information. All these numbers we're asking for you to give us here are GST inclusive. Please remember that your mortgage repayment itself is not deductible. We can only look at the interest portion of that repayment. So if you're not sure, you'll have to go to the bank to actually get a statement of how much interest you paid on that home loan for the year. Now, the other thing just to keep in mind is that just because the loan is secured against the home doesn't mean it was for the home. So if you've got a debt consolidation loan, if we used your mortgage to purchase a car or some other asset or a holiday, we can't claim that portion. We can only claim the portion of the loan that is attributable to buying the house. Again, if you're not sure about that, please contact us. The next screen is about the private use of a business motor vehicle. So this only applies to you if the motor vehicle is in the company name and then is used by you or available by you or a staff member throughout the year. Now, if it is in the company name, it is available to you outside of the company time. You can't. It's not very easy for you to justify why it's not, so you'd have to say yes in this particular case. And you give us some more information about that, and we'd then contact you about fringe benefit tax. If you've got any questions about that, feel free to give me a call. The next screen deals with the flip side. You might have a private motor vehicle that we use for business purposes, and we have most of our clients in this scenario where the motor vehicle is in the personal name, but we claim a portion of it for the business. So that's the scenario I'm going to go through here. Now, in some cases you will have put all the fuel and repairs and maintenance and insurance, etc. Through the company, and we already would have recorded that in the company. If that's the case, you click yes to the next question. If it's not the case, you've paid for them all yourself, say no, and we're going to get some more information from you. If you're going to have a schedule for that, which you're just going to upload, say a spreadsheet where you've documented all those expenses, click yes to the third question. If not, click no, and it's now going to ask us for all the information that we're going to ask for. The sort of information we need to know is the general information about the vehicle. If in the past we've used the share of use method, we need to know the percentage of business use out of the total. Again, if we've worked with you in the past, we will discuss this with you. If you are new to us, then please give us a call and we'll talk through this with you. If you're not using share of use, then we're going to need to know the total number of business kilometres that you want to claim. Okay, if we are using share of use, then we also need to know the total expenses that you've paid for the vehicle. Not just the business portion, but the total portion that relates to the whole vehicle. Now keep in mind, if you've got more than one vehicle, you need to split them out. So if you've got vehicle for yourself and one for your partner, and it's your vehicle that you use for the business, then you need to go through and itemize these vehicle by vehicle. If you have more than one vehicle that you are claiming for, click on the next motor vehicle button at the bottom, and you can put in more than one vehicle. Remember here that if you are using share of use method, we do need to have an accurate logbook at least once every 3 years for at least a 3-month period. If you're not doing share of use and you're just doing mileage, you still need to have a logbook. While all I need from you is the total number of kilometres, you need to make sure you do keep those records for at least 3 years in case the IRD asks for them. Okay, now we talk about private use, and we're asking here, did the business incur any costs which have a private use component? So this might be you might have paid for a training trip that you went on to Fiji, but you took an extra week of personal time after that. Well, that's a business cost that has a private use component. Were there any business proceeds that were not banked? Again, if this is the case, naughty, you should always bank business proceeds into the business account and then take it out as drawings. But if any items were not banked straight into the business account, then we need to account for that here. Did you pay any business expenses from private funds? Now, hopefully, you've already told us about that, particularly at GST time, but if anything jumps to mind that says, oh, that's right, you know, I paid that GST bill or I paid something else out of my private funds, then click yes, and then say either, yep, I'm going to give you a spreadsheet for that, or no, I'm going to enter it into this screen here. And the last one was, are there any assets aside from vehicles you used both in your business and for private use during the period? So any shared use assets that we might need to adjust for. Okay, this is almost at the end now. Any other information that we need to know, I'll let you read through these. Most of these are no. Transactions with associated entities. Again, if we are the accountant for all those organisations, you don't need to tell us because we already know it. If there are other organisations that you're a shareholder in or that you have an associated relationship with, then you need to tell us more about that information so that we can factor that into the accounts correctly. And then finally, it's those same wrap-up questions we saw on the personal return, just asking you about some basic details of whether anything's changed and if there's anything special you want to talk to us about. And when you've done all that, you'll click Next. Now it takes you to the wrap-up screen where it tells you all the questions you haven't answered. Now it's not going to stop you from finalising this, but I recommend that if there's anything here it tells you that you need to go back to that particular screen, clicking the previous button, and complete that information. If you're all ready, you click Finalise. It'll now take you to the sign-off form, which you can sign electronically or you can print and then sign it by hand and send it back to us. And then the last screen will be the checklist of the items that you have said you need to send us, and we recommend that you print that checklist and tick that off as you've got all the information, and then either scan it or email it to us. If you've already uploaded those files, you can simply say uploaded here in the client check column, and then maybe you can fax or scan that form to us so we know that everything has been received. As I said earlier, we don't start your work, even though you've submitted the questionnaire, until we have received this checklist. So I recommend that you move on this pretty quickly, otherwise it will cause a delay in your account's preparation. Okay, so that completes the process. Once you've completely finished something and signed off the checklist, the items will disappear from your questionnaire screen, so you know what you still have outstanding to do. If you have any questions on how you need to answer these questions, please feel free to send us an email or give us a call. We're more than happy to tell you or guide you through the appropriate steps on these questionnaires. For some of you, you might feel a little nervous about going through these questions on your own. We'd recommend in that case that you book either a phone conference or a video conference with us, or come into the office, and we'll then be able to walk through with you and help you answer those questions face to face or voice to voice, just to make sure you understand what you're actually answering. The information on these forms are important. It's good to be as accurate as you can. If you make a mistake and you realise after you finalise, don't sweat it. Just send us an email so that we can make sure our records are up to date. As I said, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to give us a call. We use these questionnaires to help you and us be more efficient and to keep our workflow moving along well, and we hope that you find this information and this process beneficial. Remember that once you've answered these for the first year, next year they'll be a lot easier. Great, thanks so much for your attention. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call.